Greetings, this is the Grumpy Old Slan, and today we're going to take a quick look at the first issue of Métal Hurlant, the famous French comic book magazine. On the cover we can see a drawing by Möbius. It's quite a famous image, so let's get right into it. We have a brief editorial by Jean-Pierre and it explains how four people, Philippe Drouillet, Jean Giraud, better known as Möbius, Jean-Pierre Dionnet, and Bernard Farkas, got together, founded Les Humanoïdes Associés in order to publish a book by Möbius called Le Bandard Fou, to come up with a quarterly science fiction comic book, and to prepare a whole bunch of other stuff. This is not me paraphrasing, this is their exact words. And so they worked hard on it, and the first issue came out in 1975, in January to be exact. And let's look at the content. First, we have a story by Philippe Drouillet, illustrated by Möbius, called Approach on Centauri. It's basically about the pilot of a spaceship approaching Centauri, who, as he does the jump into hyperspace, will experience some rather surreal things. And on being asked if he had distinguished anything, if there was any weird occurrence, because there seemed to have been a malfunction, he says, "Nope, I remember nothing," and that's the end of the story. We then have another short story. This one is by Drouillet, just 3 pages. We then have a review of science fiction in France in the mid-70s by Jean-Pierre Dionnet. It's titled 39 novels, 6 collections, 2 records, and a thematic anthology, Some Noise in the Hallway, and Cordwainer Smith. And it talks about publishers. He mentions some French authors. He also mentions authors English readers will recognize, like Heinlein, Wyndham, Silverberg, obviously Cordwainer Smith. The article ends in the last paragraph, looking forward to a new big budget movie that will be coming out shortly called Doc Savage. It's really looking forward to it. Unfortunately, with hindsight, we know that film was a complete dud and a flop, deservedly so. Next, we have a 2-page short by Möbius, followed by a quick ad, and then the first page of Arzak, a story with Möbius's famous character. This is the first time he ever appears in print. This image you see there is going to be used when Métal Hurlant will be translated as Heavy Metal Magazine. That'll be the cover of the 2nd issue. So we have Arzak flying around on his strange bird, flying through this giant skeleton, an image that will be kept in the Tarna sequence of the Heavy Metal movie. After this, we have a black and white story, again by Drouillet. It's called Agorn. We can see Drouillet's characteristic, very hard to read lettering on the cover there. He's known for his Baroque and overly ornate drawings, and we can see that here. What I assume might have been a center spread here, since it's like fills the 2 pages and you had to rotate it 90 degrees to see it in its proper orientation. We then have an ad for Le Bandard Fou, that book that Les Humanoïdes promised to publish. It's their first book and they're very proud of it. The next story is one by Corbin. I think it was originally published in black and white. The color was added later, either for this edition or for another English language edition previous to this. Then there's a 1-page story by Möbius. Some weird stream of consciousness, 2-page text, credited to Major Grubert. For those who don't know, Major Grubert is a character that was created by Möbius. He does appear in a bunch of his comics, most famously the Airtight Garage. Then we have one of the longest stories. It's called The Armies of the Conqueror. It's written by Dionnet and was illustrated by a relative newcomer, Jean-Claude Gall. Just to quickly translate the text here. In those days, the armies of the conqueror left to invade the world. No one knew who they were or where they came from, only that one day they would be there. Sometimes they were stopped, a few times they had to back down, but always they came back. And the vanquished increased the size of their ranks. And then the story starts saying how the vanguard of the Second Army arrives in front of a city. The gates are open, there's no watchman. They suspect a trap, so weapon in hand, they enter the city. Nothing seems to stop them. no resistance whatsoever. And then a few locals come out of their houses to submit themselves to the army and to welcome them. They still do some looting. However, one of the officers has a discussion with a soldier who isn't taking part in any of the celebrations and looting, who is displeased. He's worried. This is not normal. They should have resisted. They discuss the possibility of the lack of resistance being because of their religion, and the officer mentions how he's ordered that the priests shouldn't be killed and the temples should be left alone, but have also doubled the watch. So he's not a complete fool. And then the days go by, they stay in the city, and one of the officers talks to another and saying, "What does this mean? I've ordered this gate to be guarded and there's nobody here." They realize that the soldiers are disappearing and they're not deserting, and it's not even the population that's resisting them. It's the city. And then the officer dies. There's these strange lines around his eyes, which maybe implies that there's some sort of psychic power or aura that the city has, and he was getting too close to the truth, so the city killed him off. It's not clear, which is, the ambiguity is kind of nice. And the other officer just says, "Well, I will not be had this way." He runs off. He rings a gong, which should call the army to him, but only 3 soldiers show up. And then he recognizes one of his soldiers who seems to have gone native, and then cuts to a later time. And a few leagues away from there, the second army finds 4 bodies strewn along the path. One of those was the body of an officer. Worried about a trap, they take their weapons in hand and enter the city. And that's the end of the story. Great artwork by a newcomer. Great writing by Jean-Pierre. This also is the last story. We've got a few ads and it's the end of the issue. This has been the Grumpy Old Slan, taking a look at the very first issue of Métal Hurlant. I'll see you next time.